a few days later. And so we liked Mark. We felt like there might be something there. So we were like, hey, Mark, why don't you come and join our movie night that we're going to have? He's like, okay, yeah, I'll probably be there. So he shows up, and he ends up sitting next to me at the movie night. So we start talking, and then and I don't know where his English is at the time. We start talking, and he says, so I'm going to go see the movie the day after tomorrow. And I said, oh, great, what movie are you going to see? And he said, the day after tomorrow. And I said, awesome, man. What movie are you going to go see? And he said, the day after tomorrow. And then I changed to Chinese, and I said, okay, 我知道你后天要去看电影。我知道要去看什么电影。And then in English, he says, Clay, the name of the movie is the day after tomorrow. And I was like, oh, I've never heard of it, but it sounds great. So that was kind of how our relationship began, was on the tennis court, and then through a great who's on first kind of, neither one of us understanding the other one conversation, which was fantastic. So like I mentioned, back then I lived in Taichung. I was a single guy, lived in an apartment by myself, and in most apartments and houses, you have like a dining table that you eat at because you need to eat. Well, as a single guy living in Taiwan, I was like, I'm never gonna cook, and it's so cheap to eat out. I just ate out all the time. I may have cooked in my apartment 3 times a year, so maybe 9 times the whole time I lived in Taichung. And so I talked to my team leaders, and I was like, hey, could I get rid of this table and get a ping pong table instead? Because that'll get a lot more use. And they were like, yeah, sure, you can do that. So my table ended up being a ping pong table in my dining room that we played for hours on, and like with students and meeting new people and everything. It was great. And I may have eaten on it, just a couple of times ever. But every morning I would spend time with the Lord, and whenever I was spending time with the Lord, I would go sit at that ping pong table. And I'd read my Bible, I'd worship, I'd pray, and I remember one day, I still remember exactly where I was sitting. It was in 2001. I'm sitting there and I'm reading, and I had read this passage a million times, but I'm reading in 1 Corinthians, and I get to 1 Corinthians 11:1. And Paul writes, and he says, be imitators of me, just as I also am of Jesus. And for some reason it stuck out to me that time, and like it never had before, and I thought, well, that's pretty cocky, That's a pretty bold thing to say, imitate me. And then I just heard the Lord speak very clearly to me and say, that's what I've called you to do. I've called you as somebody who's going to make a disciple, as somebody who's been called to make disciples. I've called you to say to other people, imitate me. And I thought, well, but I'm not perfect. There's so many things that I do wrong, so many times that I mess up. I can't say to other people, imitate me. And then I just heard him really clearly say, but you're not the most important thing there. It doesn't just say imitate me, period. It says imitate me as I imitate Christ. And really, isn't that what it's all about? Like inviting people along as I follow Jesus, inviting people along to join me in that. And that's what I want to talk about today. So, if I'm going to say to somebody, imitate me, do what I do, because I'm following Jesus, I should probably look at what it is that Jesus did, right? That would probably be a good place to start. So, growing up in the church, I've heard pastors my whole life talk about, well, those that were really bold, talk about what it is that Jesus did. And he really only did 3 things during his public ministry. He preached the kingdom, he healed the sick, and he cast out demons. Has anybody ever heard that before? Those are the 3 things that Jesus did. If so, raise your hand. We can be a little bit interactive. Okay. So some of you have heard that before. So he really did 3 things in his public ministry. But one of the things I never heard talked about, that's always, here in recent years especially, struck me, is that there was really a fourth thing that he did that he did all the time. And that was he always made disciples. Always. So we know that as we read the Bible that sometimes Jesus preached the kingdom. Sometimes he healed the sick. Sometimes he cast out demons whenever the situation called for that. But everything he did, with the exception of a few things, I will say this, with the exception of himself getting up in the morning before anybody else was awake in the early hours, he'd go and pray by himself with the Father. And then there was the one time all the disciples went into town to get food, and he was sitting at the well by himself, and the woman came up, and you know that story. But other than those few times, everything else that he did with people. At minimum, every day, he had at least 3 people with him, Peter, James, and John, right? Every day, he had 12 people with him, what we refer to as the disciples. A lot of times, he had somewhere around 70 people with him, because those are the people that he sent out into the different cities to prepare the way to heal the sick, to preach the kingdom, and to prepare the way, because he was going to be coming in there. And then, on occasion, he had multitudes with him, right? Is everybody in agreement with that? Okay. So, my thoughts are, and one of the things that the Lord's really spoken a lot to me about over the years has been to really look at how it is that Jesus discipled, how it is that he led people, that he made disciples. So one of the first things that I want to look at and talk, well, before I go there, for me, I mentioned to you earlier that I grew up in the church. And so my experience, and I'm really thankful for that. I'm really grateful that, because Lord knows where I'd be if I was just left to my own devices, because I was a pretty naughty little kid. Could tell a lot of stories, but I'm going to hold off on that. But I grew up in the church, and for me, what discipleship was a class that I went to at from 6 to 7 every Sunday night at our church. We'd go there, they'd give us some cookies, they'd give us some Kool-Aid or punch, and then we would sit there and listen to the teacher read from a book. And they might ask us a few questions at the end to see if we were listening, and then we would go home, and that was it. And that was discipleship. And I'm really thankful for that. Don't get me wrong. I'm thankful for the people that took their time every week to come and to invest in and to pour into people like me and other friends that I had. I'm really extremely grateful for that, and from what I learned in that. But I questioned, was that discipleship? And then whenever I went to university, I was at a Christian university, even though I didn't want to go there. The Lord spoke clearly to me that I was supposed to go there, and I was like, okay, fine. I go there for like 3 years, and then I'll transfer. And I didn't. I ended up graduating. But anyways, the Lord really had me there. And so at this Christian university, I'm there with a ton of people who are studying to be in the ministry. Tons of people who are going to be pastors and speakers and youth leaders and all this stuff. And I was just going to be an engineer. That was my focus at the time. I was like, I don't want to mess with all that stuff. I'm going to be an engineer. But I watched a lot of my friends, and I really love the Lord, and I watched a lot of my friends how it was that they went about discipleship and how the Bible professors did discipleship. And what that consisted of was they would meet one-on-one every week or every other week, and they would read through a book together and talk about the book. And then that was it. And that's a good thing as well. Like, I know that was really helpful and beneficial to those people. But again, I question, was that really discipleship? And so then I start really looking at the Bible for myself and really started listening to what it was that the Father wanted to speak to me through this. And what I realized with Jesus' life is that it was vastly different from a classroom setting. Or it was vastly different from just sitting down one-on-one and talking with somebody about something that we had read. What Jesus' life and model looked like was that of invitation and that of challenge. He invited people that the Father had led him to into his life, and he challenged them to grow and to be able to do the same things that it was that he was doing. So whenever Jesus started his ministry, I want to take a look back at this because I really feel like this is important, and I think it was on the was on the screen. When Jesus started his ministry, everything started with, and I'm going to read real quick from Matthew 3, and most everybody probably knows this. When Jesus was baptized, and this is considered to be the beginning of his ministry. Matthew 3, 16. After being baptized, Jesus came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending as a dove and lighting on him. And behold, a voice out of the heavens said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." So Jesus comes, and God's first stamp of approval on him to the public is, "This is my Son, and I'm very pleased with him." And then Jesus comes, and prior to Jesus coming, the only way that people knew God was as this person to be feared up in heaven, kind of a Zeus-type figure, like just waiting to smite you for doing wrong, waiting to punish you for doing something incorrectly or disobeying. And so people had this fear, and they just let people like KC, who knew God intimately, "KC, you go talk to him for us. You go do the God thing and just tell us what we're supposed to do, and we'll do it." Maybe. So he was like this distant God type figure, right? But then Jesus shows up, and God says to him, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And then from that point on, in Jesus' life, every time, except for when he was on the cross, one time quoting Psalms, which that's a completely different message. Every time Jesus referred to and talked to God or about God, he called him Father, is usually how most of our translations translate it. But the word he actually used was Abba, which is like saying Dada or Baba here in Taiwan. It was this really intimate word, this really close connected word, that of a baby connecting with his dad. And so Jesus starts talking to and about this distant, in their minds, God, like he came from his living room, And so I think that's really important, and it was really crazy back then, because what that carried a lot more meaning. What that meant was Jesus was saying, I came from him, and I know him. It brought about this sense of intimacy between Jesus and Abba that they had never known before, had never seen before, that they didn't understand. But so Jesus comes, and he doesn't shy away from that. He continually refers to God as Father. And I think that that's really key, especially as we look at how Jesus lived his life and how he modeled discipleship, and then how Paul, the language Paul uses when he talks about family, and they met from house to house. It really paints this picture of family. So when Jesus came, he invited these people into his life, and he began modeling for them what it was that he and his Father did, what their family business was. If you'll remember, he in Luke chapter 4, after Jesus left the wilderness and came back, he went back to his own household, his own family. He went back to the place that he'd grown up in. And he went to the temple, and he picked up the scroll of Isaiah, and he read, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord." And I won't get into this right now, but one of the things that's neat to see here is that if you go back and you read that passage in Isaiah, there's a whole lot of negative stuff, that like condemnation and things that are like, if you don't do this, and this will happen. But Jesus, what it is that he pulls out and proclaims about himself is blessing. That's how he's going to reach the world. That's why he's been anointed, is to bless, and is to bring about this life into people. That's Casey will talk about that next week. But that's something really interesting to say. So he comes, and to his own family, he proclaims, "This, me and my Father, this is our business. This is what we're about, is freedom and life." And after some conversation there, his family, the place where he'd grown up, they didn't like that too much, and they tried to kill him. And so then from there, Jesus goes and he finds friends who are ready to walk with him, and he invites them into his life. And those friends become followers, and they begin following him, and they begin giving up their own agenda to go after him. They leave behind their family's business, their father's work, and they start following Jesus. Some of them are fishermen, some of them are tax collectors, some of them, all doing different things. They begin, as followers, they leave behind that stuff, and they say, "We're going to follow you, we're going to do what you do." And then we even know that there were a lot of people that did that. There were a lot of disciples. There were a lot of followers. Because if we look in John chapter 6, Jesus is talking, and he's sharing with a ton of people who are called disciples in the scripture. They're called disciples, and he starts telling them about who he is. And they're like, whoa. What? You want me to eat your flesh and drink your blood? What are you talking about? And he continues to go with them, and they said, "Well, our father is Abraham." And he says, "No, your father is Satan, and you don't know my father." And then they all leave him, right? Do you all remember that? That I'm very much convinced that. It's a great chapter. You can learn a lot from it. But basically, that's like the nutshell of what happened. And then Jesus turns to the 12, who we also call the disciples, and he says, "What about you guys? You're not going to leave too?" And Peter's response was what? Does anybody remember? You can say it out loud. Somebody. Say it again. You have the words of life. Where are we going to go? You have words of life. And so Jesus knows then that they are sticking with him, that they are following him. And as they continue to walk and do life together, they grow and they become family. One of the things that was neat for me to see and experience when I lived in Taichung back in the past, and it wasn't something that I had studied, it was something that we just kind of stumbled upon, to be honest. But we began inviting people like Mark into our lives, and Forrest and Sarah and Jenny and Andrew and Josh and all these different people. They began coming and being a part of our lives, and we essentially said to them, come with me, imitate me as I imitate Jesus. And as they went from friends to followers, we really discovered that we had become family together. And the way we became family together was we lived life together. We would eat together, not necessarily every day like Jesus did with his 12, but a lot of times. Multiple times throughout the week, we would eat together. We'd cook together. I'd teach them how to try to make like American-style hamburgers or like cookout. You guys call it a braai. We would teach them how to do that. And then they would teach us how to make like shui jiao and dumplings and fried rice and that kind of deal. And it was just fun. We'd be in there cooking together, laughing together, screwing things up together, making a mess together, but we were becoming family in the process. We would go out together and we would share the gospel. We'd take our guitars out and we'd just start singing and worshiping the Lord in public. And as people would start coming up, we'd begin taking that opportunity to share with them about what we were doing. We would go out and we would exercise together. We'd play tennis or we'd play basketball together. We would get together throughout the week, usually a couple times throughout the week, and we would worship together and we would pray together and we would study the Bible together and share what it was that the Lord was teaching us. And I think this is something that's real key. As we make disciples, and as we see in Jesus' life, he taught his disciples how to hear from the Father for themselves. One of Jesus' teaching methods was asking them questions. He asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" He asked them different questions, and he didn't just tell them what they needed to know all the time. He let them begin to discover it, and them screw up, and them mess things up a little bit, and then he would come back and help them fix it. And I think it's really important for us, as we are about making disciples to learn to listen to those disciples of ours, to ask them questions, to not always have the answer for them, but to say, well, let's pray about it. What do you hear the Father saying? Or what does the Bible say to you? What did the Father say to you? And what has the Father already said? I can tell you that from Mark, the Lord's taught me a lot through what He's spoken to Mark. Mark is younger than me spiritually, and physically. He's younger than me in the Lord, but at the same time, I can learn from him because I know that he can hear from the Father. And he has something for me through that. And I think that's really important as we make disciples to really learn to listen and ask questions and teach people how to hear the Father's voice. So within a good family, whenever you have kids, a good mommy and daddy, that's what our girls call us. They're the cute little ones making all the noise back in the back room. Within a good family, the mommy and daddy, they're going to protect their kids from the beginning. When they're born, they can't do anything except poop and eat, and you can barely do those things, and sleep. And so you do everything for them. You take care of them. You clean up after them and for them. You want to protect them. You want to make sure that they've got food. You want to make sure that they have a place to sleep. But as they get older, and they will get older, and they will grow up, you want to teach them how to be self-sufficient. You want to teach them how to be able to tie their own shoes. I'll tell you, our 7-year-old, she can tie her own shoes now, but she's not very good at it still, And there are times that we're like, oh my gosh, this is taking forever waiting for her. Or she'll get it tied, and as soon as we get out and we're on the elevator, it's like, oh, my shoes came untied again, and we're like, oh, man. But if we just keep doing it for her all the time, she'll be going off to college just wearing flip-flops because she can't tie her shoes. That's not okay, So in a good family, you need to be able to teach and empower your kids to be able to do things on their own and to be able to learn and become self-sufficient. So that as they get older, they're able to function better. They're able to raise their own kids and teach them how to do these things. And that's the way the Lord has it set up. That's the way it's supposed to be. And I think when we look at how it is that Jesus did life, he modeled that same thing. First, he invited them in, and he showed them. He took care of them. Whenever they joined Jesus' family, Jesus became responsible for them. They left their own work. Jesus was responsible for them. So where they ate, where they slept, where they went, everything was at Jesus' lead. And his lead was from the Father because he only did what he saw the Father doing and he only said what he heard the Father saying, right? So everything that they were a part of, it was through Jesus' influence and his taking care of them. And at first he began to model for them what it was that he and his Father were about. And that was bringing freedom to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. To do those three things that I mentioned earlier, preach the kingdom, heal the sick, cast out demons. That was what Jesus and his Father was about. And so that was what Jesus modeled with these followers of his, those that he invited in and those that he led. So, as they continued, Jesus began telling them, all right, I want you to go out and I want you to heal the sick, preach the kingdom, cast out demons. And they began to do that. On occasion, they would mess up. Sometimes Jesus would get frustrated with them. He'd let them have it a little bit, and then he'd love on some more. And it's the same thing with moms and dads. Probably everybody in here can attest to that. Sometimes you screw up. Sometimes you do something incorrectly. Mom and dad will get on to you a little bit, but you know that they still love you. Jesus modeled that for them. He still loved and took care of them. But Jesus did all of this to prepare them for what was it that he said at the very end of his time on earth. In Matthew 28, the second most famous passage in the Bible behind John 3:16. Matthew 28, 18 through 20, Jesus says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So the last thing that Jesus said to his followers was, go and do what I did, basically. Go and do what I modeled for you. So he raises up a family, he grows up a family, and he empowers them to go out and to lead as fathers and mothers, people, into the same thing, into his teaching, into the family business, the kingdom business, calling sons and daughters home to their Father in heaven who loves them, who's not angry with them, who's not mad at them anymore, but who loves them and wants them to know and to be all that he's created them to be. That was what Jesus was about. That was what his Father's about, and that's what he wants us to be about as well, is to know who we are, to know that we are loved, beloved sons and daughters, to bring other people into that relationship, to teach them how to do the things that Jesus did when he was here on the earth. He is our example. And so one of the things that I ask myself, and I ask you as well, is if we are called to be, if we call ourselves disciples, I believe that someone who's a disciple is someone who's making disciples. I think that's what the scriptures teach. So if we're not making disciples, and I don't say this to condemn anybody, I ask myself this question a lot, and I think it's really good to just ask tough questions on occasion, you know, and to look and not feel condemned about it or anything like that, but to just really look and say, you know, if we really love the Lord and we really want to do and experience all that it is that he has for us, sometimes we've got to ask questions like this. Am I making disciples? Or am I just a believer? And I don't minimize just being a believer, because that's where it all begins, and that's amazing. Whenever you step into that realization that I am a beloved son and daughter of the creator of the universe who loves me, that's amazing. But that's just like stepping through the door. That's like going to Disney World and like going through the front gate, right? But if you just stand at the front gate and you're like, awesome. If you just stand there and just admire that, you're missing out on so much more that is there and available to you. So much more. And so really to be able to experience the much more, the fullness and the depth of what it is that he's called us to, where we'll find life and we'll find meaning, we'll find joy, and we'll find love, and we'll find challenge, is to step into that place to where we boldly say, with confidence, knowing that we are imperfect people, but we're being perfected, imitate me because I'm imitating Jesus. Because that's really what he's called us to do, is to be bold enough to say, imitate me, come with me, because I'm going after it. And whenever we do that, whenever we step into that place, I think we really will begin to experience the more of what it is that we all want. We all want to be about the family business. We all want to see people healed. We all want to see people come to know Jesus. We all want to see, demons cast out and put in their place. We all want to see that. And I think the more we step out in opening up our own lives and inviting people in, we'll be able to experience that as well. It can get messy because life is messy. Mark can tell you, because he's a part of our life, he's a part of my family's life. When he comes over to our apartment like multiple times throughout the week, we spend a lot of time together. When he comes over, there's clothes on the floor waiting to be folded, and that's okay. He comes over, and sometimes the girls are throwing a fit because they're exhausted, and that's okay. Everything's not perfect, and life's not perfect, and I'm not perfect, and you're not perfect. So let's get over ourselves together and let's say, you know what, we're not, but we're going to follow. We're going to do what Jesus told us to do, and we're going to follow after the Lord, and we're going to invite people into the mess as well. Because really, that's where we'll begin to see more transformation. That's where it gets real. That's where people are like, when Mark steps into our mess and he sees, clothes on the floor, food on the table, food all over the floor because our 1.5-year-old on us, she eats about 30% and the other 70% she throws on the floor. When he sees that, he looks at us, he's like, man, if these guys can do this, I can do this. You know, I'm a huge encouragement to Mark. Our life is a huge encouragement to Mark and to other people because they're like, they don't have it all together. But they love Jesus. And we can invite people into that. So don't be afraid of messy. And one other thing that I want to mention is for the longest time, and I could talk a lot about this, but Casey limited me to 2 hours, so just kidding, I'm almost there. A lot of times we try to keep things separated or compartmentalized, like I work, this is my work life, this is my family life, this is my ministry life, and this is my whatever else it is. Right? We try to keep those things separated. We try to protect those things. Like, okay, I'm going to give this much time here, and this much time here, and this much time here, so hopefully I don't screw up anything too much, right? But whenever we look at Jesus' life, there was no separation. He didn't compartmentalize. His life was his life. His work was his work. His life was that of discipleship. And Paul's was the same way. Peter's was the same way. We see this all throughout the scriptures. So it doesn't matter if we've been called to be a pastor, or if we've been called to work in the corporate world, white-collar worker, called to work at McDonald's, or called to work or we're working at the tea shop down the street, or we're a stay-at-home mom trying to raise 3 crazy kids. It doesn't matter. Our life is discipleship. Just like Jesus. I'll tell you, whenever I went back to the States in 2004, I thought that I'd be back over here in Taiwan within like a year or two. And it's 12 years later and I'm back here now. And the Lord just made it real clear to us that we were supposed to plant roots in Greenville, South Carolina for a while. And I was like, why? There's nothing here. And, what am I supposed to do? And I ended up getting a job, which is funny because I'd never taken a business class in my life. I ended up getting a job at this huge international company where I became their international marketing specialist. So I go from like never having studied even personal finance 101 to writing $80 million proposals that I'm fully responsible for. It's hilarious. I didn't know. But I spoke Chinese and they love that. So Chinese will do a lot for you. But so I'm there and I'm behind the computer all the time and I'm like, God, why am I here? What am I doing here? Like, you've called me to make disciples in Taiwan. What's in Greenville? And I just felt really clearly him say, I know, yeah, you'll be in Taiwan, but I've called you to make disciples. And so you're going to learn how to make disciples while you're working a 60-hour-a-week job in the corporate world. And you're going to be about making disciples here at this business. And you're going to be about making disciples within your family, with your kids, and with your wife. And y'all are going to learn how to do this together and how to balance time. And not just balance time, but really how, like I just shared a minute ago, for this to become your life. And I shared a story at the Chinese service earlier. I got to pray with and share with and encourage tons of people. I got to travel to China and share the gospel with people in China several times. I go there 4 or 5 times a year for my job. Go to Japan and share with people there while I was on business and that kind of thing. And it was fantastic. And I got to pray for people. The president and the vice president and general manager of of the company where I work. One day I saw him and he's just walking like this, literally about this far down the hallway at a time. He's walking like that. And I was like, I saw him way down the hall, and immediately I felt like the Lord said, I want you to go pray for him. And I was like, and so I was like, okay. So I start walking down there, and I don't get there in time. He walks into a meeting, and I was like, oh, I tried. So I went back to my desk, started working again. And this is a Friday afternoon. So I get off work and I walk out to the car, and sure enough, there he is. He's limping and about to sit down in his car. And I get to him right as he's sitting down in his car, and I was like, all right, okay. So I walk over to him and I'm like, hey, got hurt, I see? He's like, yeah. And so what's going on? So he shared with me. And he said, or I said, well, this might seem weird to you. I don't mean for it to be weird or awkward. But I've prayed for a lot of people in Singing Hill. And I believe that the Lord wants to show you how much he loves you by healing your foot. Do you mind if I pray for you? And he was like, looked at me, he was crazy. He was like, okay, sure. I'll do it. I'll try anything. So he's in his car, and I kneel down and I start praying for him. And I start telling his foot what to do. And then I was like, all right, have a good weekend. Headed back to my car, and he drove off. And I remember, me walking away and him kind of looking at his foot and then turning around and getting in his car. Well, then on Monday, back at work, and I'm walking by, and he's in all these high-level meetings and everything. He's in on a conference call. And I remember walking by the room, and I noticed that he was in there, but I didn't make eye contact or anything. Just walked by and saw people were in there and just kept walking. Then I heard, Clay, Clay, Clay. I'm far down, and it's him coming out of the room. And I was like, yeah. And he said, I gotta get right back in there because it's a corporate call. But he said, I wanted to tell you, my foot was all better when I got home. And I was like, yeah. And he said, yeah, whatever you did, it worked. And I was like, well, all I did was obey and share with you that God the Father loves you. And he wants you to know that, and he wanted to bring healing to your foot. And he was like, that's awesome, it's been great. I can walk this fine. And so it was really awesome. But you have that opportunity wherever you are, whether you're a white-collar worker, whether you're teaching English, whether you're working at a TCN, whether you're at 7-Eleven, whether you're a pastor, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whatever you're doing, you have that opportunity to be constantly inviting people into what it is the Father's doing. And inviting people into the Father's business and teaching them and giving to them what it is that you've been given. Amen? So I really want to encourage you guys to look. I almost started speaking Chinese for a second. I really want to encourage you guys to look yourselves at Jesus' life. To open up your Bible, to spend time looking at what it is that he did and how it is that he did things, and look at it through the lens of family and what a family looks like. Because really the Father is about family, he's about bringing people into his family, and he's about reproduction. And he's about redemption. He wants to call the lost sons and daughters home, to know who they really are and what they were really created for. And he wants us to reproduce ourselves because we are people who follow Jesus. So I really want to encourage you guys with that. Next week, Casey and I talked about you really need to study, because next week we're going to pick 3 people to come up and share for 10 minutes at random what it is that they learned about. I'm just kidding. But no, I really do encourage you, because one of the things that Jesus said is that he said, my sheep know my voice. And I want each of you, if you know Jesus, if you've given your life to him, that you have the ability to hear from him, to hear from the Father. You do know his voice. So really open up your Bibles, begin to pray, and begin to ask the Lord to show you what it is to really be about, how it is to really be about making disciples. Okay? Let me pray for us. Abba, we really do love you and thank you so much for just for your goodness, for your love. Thank you that you don't condemn. Thank you that you don't sit up there waiting for us to screw up, but that you're up there waiting for us to just get what it is that you've given us, that you've freely given us in Jesus. Thank you so much for giving us Jesus, who is the ultimate model. Help us to learn through your Spirit and through your word how to model our lives after him. How to say with boldness and confidence in the midst of the mess, imitate me because I'm imitating Jesus. I don't have it perfect. going to screw up. But as we sang about earlier, we have a good, good Father who loves us, who wants the best for us. So, Father, for every person in this room, I just ask that your boldness would rise up within them, that your strength would rise up within them, because all that's been freely given. It's there. We just need to learn how to tap into it. That would just rise up within every person in this place. And that we would be able to say with boldness and confidence, follow me. Because I'm following Jesus. Open our eyes to see and our ears to hear what it is that you're saying. What it is that you're doing. And Father, may our families, may our friends, may the circles of influence that we have, may they be radically changed. Because we know who we are, and we know how to tell other people who they were created to be. I pray that every person in this room would grow into becoming an amazing father and mother, raising up children to go and start more kingdom families all over this city, all over this nation, all over the world. We love you. We thank you so much for loving us. We love you too. We pray all this in Jesus' name.